Good afternoon to everyone who is watching this video, most especially to my beautiful instructor of Forensic 4, Mrs. Kisidoy Tormis Bonte. Good afternoon, ma'am. I wish you're in a good health. So I am Ruel Labami Lantigsi and I'm tasked to report about the methods of examinations. So as an overview, this report will tackle about the different methods being applied from the ancient times until the present upon examining the authorship and the events of a certain document. So to start with, let's talk about simple study. Simple study of the content of a text sometimes reveal its authorship and date. So this means that by means of examining the content of the certain text or a document, the events or happenings being portrayed in that document was being identified in terms of who is the author and who made such content and even convey the date when was the text was written. So the simple study means the simple examination of a certain document of a certain text, in which by means of constant studying or simple studying, the author and the event was being identified by means of that study. So the author and the date was being determined. Next, the one author of the commentary of Habakkuk mentioned certain events current to his own time. So the Habakkuk was the 8th book of the 12 minor prophets of the Bible, in which it is attributed to the prophet Habakkuk. So this book was composed in the late 7th century. This means that certain events currently being determined in its own time. So this means that an event takes place in its very own time. Because such event exists or being done in a specific time in which serve as the determinant of such event. So that specific time that the document was being written serves as the determinant of the certain events on its date. Next, this could place the commentary's origin at the time of the Roman capture of Palestine under Pompey in 63 before Christ. So the Roman capture of the Palestine under Pompey, or otherwise known as the Siege of Jerusalem. So Pompey was the great campaign in the east wherein Pompey conquered Jerusalem, which ends the Jewish independence and the incorporation of Judea as a client kingdom of Roman Republic. So customs and other practices of life are another way to gain insight as to when a text was written. So by means of such customs and practices, so customs and practices could be a determinant for us to determine when was the date of a certain text was written. So for instance, celebrating Christmas and even writing love letters during Valentine's Day. So by means of such actions of celebrating Christmas or writing love letters as one of our customs and practices, we tend to remember when was the date of such event. So for instance, celebrating Christmas, it was being celebrated during December 25 in every year, and even February 14 in Valentine's Day. So that is the determinants of determining when was the date of a certain event or a certain document. Next, also to be taken into account are details within a text which are no longer available, such as fine descriptions of cities, structures which have long since been destroyed. So this refers to the destroyed informations being portrayed or being unavailable as time passes by, which we tend to forget. So for instance, a cities wherein it has barangays and puroks. So as time passes by, when the city is being developed, so it was the names of the puroks or barangays or sitios are being changed. So that is the unavailable information that we tend to forget when that as time passes by and the places or cities were being developed. Next, those who approach biblical writings with the presupposition that prophecy is impossible sometimes use prophecy as proof of a late date. So there is an application of a prophecy in order to determine a late date, because the biblical writings involve different dates and events wherein by means of prophecy the certain date of events was being determined. Because earlier before, the use of prophecy was very common, because some of the prophets prophesied that a certain event will happen in the future. Next, linguistic peculiarities. may also offer insight into when and by whom a text was written. Now, what is linguistic peculiarities? So this implies upon offering insight into when and by which a text was written. So peculiarities means quality or state of being universal, unusual rather, or distinctive of a particular person or place. So this means there are different characteristics that was being portrayed. So next, the style, the particular words or phrases chosen and specific topic for which detail is provided or emphasis is given tend to indicate the author's background and the general period in history. So the style. So the style was the great determinants of a certain events of who is the author of such document. So for instance, so the words and phrases in the specific topics could be a determinant to identify the author's background and the general period in history, because authors do have their own styles upon putting words and phrases, or the style of word of phrases of such document. So because of such style of the author, they are being determined by their own specific and authentic style. Next, at one point, it was assumed that for the various Semitic dialects known as Aramaic, Western Aramaic was of late origin. So Semitic dialects or languages forms a branch of the Afro-Asiatic language family originated in the Middle East. It was being spoken by more than 330 million people across much of West Asia, North Africa, and Malta. So the Semitic dialects was being used or was being spoken by more than 330 million people across the West Asia, Africa, and Malta. For lack of evidence to the contrary, however, subsequent discoveries have proved otherwise, as R.K. Harrison argues. So, R.K. means, or otherwise known as Roland Kenneth Harrison. He was an Old Testament scholar, wherein he is best known for his introduction to the Old Testament. So, this statement states the lack of evidence. So, there is a need of a reliable source of evidence so that a certain text or a certain document should have a resourceful source, or it has enough evidences or supporting details so that a proof could be given or a proof could be found. The presence of Aramaic elements in the cuneiform composition from Ras Shamra, as illustrated particularly by the consonantal shift from Z to D in the relative pronoun and elsewhere, attests further to the antiquity of the tongue. So, the Aramaic elements, the Ras Shamra, was the alphabetical cuneiform script of Bigorrheic discovered on a collection of clay tablets. So, the cuneiform is relating to the wedge-shaped characters used as the ancient writings of Mesopotamia. It was being used to record a variety of information, such as simple activities, business and trade, and even used to write stories, myths, and personal letters. So, the cuneiform was widely used before in the ancient time in the Mesopotamian society, or the Mesopotamian time, in which the cuneiform was widely used upon the making temple activities, making documents such as stories, myths, and personal letters. So the Mesopotamian before utilizes the cuneiform as their way of writing and even way of their communication. So the antiquity of the tongue also means speaking ancient languages, or the state of being old. For instance, a very old car or a very old letter. So that is the antiquity of the tongue, or the ancient languages being spoken before. Next, consequently, it is no longer possible to argue for a later date for a given composition or the basic of Aramaic word and expressions in it. The danger here is that search for peculiarities can be misused if it is applied too finely. That is, if it is applied to each word or sentence of a document instead of to the document as a whole. So this means that if there is a misuse of such peculiarities, since peculiarities is the differences of the different characteristics or information, so if there is a misuse of the different peculiarities, there might be a danger that such peculiarities or differences has its own idea or notion being portrayed. So if it is applied in a word or a sentence, then it will change the whole idea of the document. Such an application, it has critics of previous era proceeded from their premises that the Bible was appended through the centuries. So the critics of previous era can be changed and being appended or added or its content as time passes by through centuries, since it says in each country the critics evolves, which do add attachment to what is being written in the previous era. So this means that by the use of critics, certain ideas or certain notions of a certain document can be changed as time passes by because of critics. Because critics also can give can add or give another idea on how to develop or how to improve a certain idea or a certain document as time passes by. So there is a innovation or there is a development brought about by some of the critics. But not all critics also can give positive idea, but also it can give a negative idea. But it is a case-to-case basis. Next, in the documentary hypothesis, as exemplified by the 18th century French physician Jean Ostrock and later modified by a number of German scholars in the 19th century, each sentence of an early document could be subjected to individual evaluation for its particular authorship. So there is an evaluation being occurred in order to determine its particular authorship. So Jean Ostrock wrote the first great treatise on venereal diseases and played a fundamental part in the origins of critical textual analysis of works of the Bible. So that is the contribution of Jean Ostrock here as a German scholar in the 19th century. So he has a big contribution in the authorship of the analysis of the Bible. So next, paleography. Paleography is the study of ancient handwritings as a comparative method of dating that can be used to discover the date of manuscripts or to corroborate the witness of other dating methods. So it is the study of the ancient writings and interpretation of historical writing systems and manuscripts. So by the use of paleography, we can decipher, we can localize, we can date and edit ancient medieval texts such as the written by hand before an advent of print, so that others could read and understand. So paleography is the study of the ancient languages or the ancient writings and interpretation of historical writing systems. So that is the use of paleography, wherein we can determine or we can study the different manuscripts being portrayed in the ancient times. We can develop the handwritings and we can understand and interpret the handwritings so that the writers also or the viewers also could understand what is being portrayed in a certain event. So for instance, the Bible. So by use of paleography, the languages or the handwritings in the Hebrew was being translated into English so that everyone who knows English could also understand what is written in the Bible. So that is the use of paleography itself. William F. Albright and John C. Trevor come to separate but identical conclusions on the paleographic studies of some of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, the Dead Sea Scrolls are the ancient Jewish and Hebrew manuscripts that are found in the Qumran caves of Judean desert. So the Dead Sea Scrolls includes the fragments from every book of the Old Testament except the book of Esther, wherein these are documents about historical regulations such as community rule and religious writing that do not appear in the Old Testament. So William F. Albright and John C. Trevor has a great contribution upon talking with the Dead Sea Scrolls. Since William F. Albright was an American archaeologist and biblical scholar, an expert of ceramics and manufacture of porcelain, while John C. Trevor was an American scholar who photographed the Great Isaiah Scroll or the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now what is the Dead Sea Scrolls? So it is the Jewish and Hebrew manuscripts. So the Dead Sea Scrolls was the ancient manuscripts being portrayed by the Dead Sea Scrolls before was widely used by the Hebrews and the Jews as a medium of communication, and writings or manuscripts. Next, archaeology. Archaeology provides more clues as to when copies of scriptures were written. So archaeology is the study of human past using material remains in which the materials could be objects that are people created, modified or used such as artifacts like tools, clothing, and decorations. So archaeology is referring to the different materials being used by the ancient people or the ancient humans before, such as objects like swords, metals, and clothing. So another example of also is an old knife or an old sword that are used before to hunt animals and even to fight the enemies. Next, the pottery in which the Dead Sea Scrolls were left undisturbed date from late Hellenistic and early Roman period of 200 BC to 100 BC. So, the Hellenistic period was the period of Mediterranean history between the death of Alexander the Great and emergence of the Roman Empire. In this period, more than 1,000 of pottery items are arranged by function. Hellenistic period, there is a widely use of pottery in this era, wherein thousands of pottery items are arranged by functions, such as pottery for cooking, serving, pouring, drinking, and dining. So there is a great use of pottery in this period, such as small jugs, plus drinking cups, cooking pots, serving dishes, and bowls. Next, more especially, excavations at Qumran have revealed the general period of occupation was from 135 before Christ to after that 68, when Roman crushed the Zealot revolt. Another example of archaeology aiding process comes from excavation in Iraq at ancient sites such as Nuzu. These tablets confirm many of the customs of ancient biblical figure observed customs such as the transferal of birthright, Abraham's purchase of a portion of land, the custom of numbering the stress at the land, and the rights of and obligations to expel slaves. So, Nuzu was the ancient Mesopotamian city located southwest of Iraq. So, the Babylonian clay tablet was the world's oldest and most accurate trigonometric table. So, the tablets confirm of many of the customs of the ancient biblical portion was the usage of the trigonometric table, so which is the Babylonian clay tablet. So the Babylonian clay tablet was an accurate measurement or an accurate tool to determine the trigonometric tables. So the trigonometric table uses the sexagesimal system based on number 60. So if we say sexagesimal system, it is based on the number 60. For instance, 1 hour and 60 minutes. So that is the sexagesimal system, which is it is basing on the 60 minutes. Next, the tablets throw interesting light upon the life and times of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Tablets throw interesting light upon the life and times of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, setting them accurately against the cultural background of 2nd millennium BC, the Assyrian society. Materials in this situation have the potential to become contaminated more easily and give false readings. So, enormous means a very large size, quantity, or extent. To the measure keep on changing on radioactive decay, in which it gives an error factor upon determining the analysis of such dating. So there is a possibility of contamination, which gives false readings of the date on how old does a certain object is. So if an object was being contaminated, there is a possibility that it will give the false readings upon determining on its date, on when was that certain object was exist. Reference by other later writings can also help to establish the date of preceding material. An Alexandrian Jewish philosopher named Aristobulus, writing between 170 to 150 before Christ, recorded that the Torah, or first 5 books of Old Testament, were translated into Greek during the reign of Ptolemy. So Aristobulus was of great contribution of the Torah, in which the Torah was the first part of the Jewish Bible wherein it is the central and most important document of Judaism that has been used by the Jews through the ages. So Torah was one of the 5 books of Moses. So the Alexandrian Jewish philosopher Aristobulus has a great contribution upon the Torah, in which it is the first 5 books of the Old Testament. So this translation was called the Septuagint LXX, to which translation of the rest of the Old Testament were later added. So the Septuagint LXX was the earliest extant Greek translation of the Old Testament from the original Hebrew. So the LXX means the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible in the 70 before Christ. So that is the meaning of the abbreviation LXX. So the LXX was fully complete prior to 117 before Christ. No light is shed upon the dates of the original writings by the LXX, but Aristobulus' comments established the importance and widespread demand of these writings very early in the history. And one word of caution concerning the use of extra-biblical confirmation for scriptural statement. It is fallacious to think scripture must always be corroborated by the use of non-biblical sources. So, fallacious means it's based on mistaken belief. So, there is a mistaken belief being portrayed in the LXX, wherein corroborated also means confirm or give support. So, it is more acceptable to include also real happenings or real proofs from the biblical sources. So, this portrays that we should be reliable enough or resourceful enough to accept biblical writings or biblical statements or happenings that will serves also as a proof of a certain document to be reliable. So, the sufficiency of informations over non-biblical sources. So, we must be reliable enough or resourceful enough to give an information. One word of caution concerning the use of extra-biblical confirmation to assume that something is false just because it's found in the Bible, just as it's equally groundless to assume that something is true because it is not. Archer cautions. So, this means that a certain text or a certain statement was something that is false because it is in the Bible. Because we cannot say or we cannot prove that it is merely the truth or merely the exact happenings being happened in the ancient times. So we must give emphasis also to the biblical writings or the biblical information so that we are able to accept what was really the truth by means of having constant sources or having constant resources upon the informations being given. So the biblical sources also could give sufficient informations because there are lots of information found in the Bible. So because to assume something is true, we should be neutral enough to accept different facts from the Bible and even not in the Bible facts. So we should be neutral upon accepting each other's facts. Next, also frequently, the tendency has been to regard any biblical statement as unreliable and suspect through the very antiquity of the Old Testament. Even by the critics' own dating should commend it for consideration as an archaeological document. In case of any discrepancy with a pagan document, even one of later age, the heathen source has been automatically given the preference as a historical witness. So discrepancy means similarity between two or more facts, while pagan is a person who worships many gods. So, in cases of discrepancy of a pagan document, so we should be a resourceful or a reliable person so that we can distinguish what are the different discrepancies being portrayed in the Bible, since the Bible itself has different informations that merely true or not. So, by means of having enough research or having enough sources, we can determine what are the different happenings really took place in the ancient times. So that's all. So this report was quite long since it includes more of the biblical writings and biblical histories. So that's it. It really contributes upon the different methods of examinations.